maybe in your career, there was that point where you thought, how can someone come to that conclusion and act in that way? Or you wonder, how can someone say something like that? It's plain rude or it's plain unacceptable. Or you see a certain behavior by leaders and think, how can someone think that it's remotely acceptable to act in such a way, to show that kind of manner, to that kind of behavior towards other employees, while at the same time wondering why we have a talent management problem? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, the issue of emotional poverty. There are a couple of cases that happened last week. Some of them went straight to the internet. Others I received via email. And of course, as promised, I keep these 100% confidential. And I'm going to give you 3 examples where you will see what I'm talking about when leaders make a decision and you say, well, that probably was not the best choice. So when you look out of the window, most likely, at least when I'm recording this right now, we have burning heat outside. It's a summer of record temperatures. I'm sitting in London here, 33 degrees outside, and you can just be happy when you have some sort of fan next to you so you can get some fresh air to cool you down, as I do right now while recording this. So when people have to work in the events industry, or they even like to work in the events industry, great, because these events are what makes life worth living for many. So, for example, yesterday I went to a barbecue next to Wembley, and Wembley Stadium had a Coldplay concert. I'm not a particular fan of Coldplay music, I have to say. However, these events must be organized, and people are working there in the burning heat. And an event company, not the one at Wembley, I want to be very clear about that. I keep this 100% confidential. An event company, and they ended up on the internet, had an amazing idea. And this company said, because of the heat, you get an extra snack from the corporation. Some of you might now think, well, an extra snack doesn't sound too much of a gift or an extra. Yeah, you're right, but it gets worse from here. They said you can get your snack, and then in an extra line, your snack of the day is a banana. That's it. Nothing more. A banana. One banana. That seems to be the bonus that leaders seem to consider appropriate. And you can pick up your banana, and then next line it says only available from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. And of course, these events that go long hours. People started working between 5 and 6 a.m. in the morning, and it ends when you have, of course, to take the whole stage away again. It ends about 2 a.m. in the morning of the next day or the following day. Of course, people work in different shifts. There's no question about that. However, the banana was only available from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. So if you start earlier, no banana. If you end later, no banana as well. Bad luck for you. And that's just one example. Example number 2. A company decides to go for the modern workforce, and they say we implement remote work so you can work wherever you want. That sounds great, doesn't it? And it is. Next one, they say not only you can work from wherever you want, we have a 4-day working week. So it's only from Monday to Thursday. And you think, amazing. And it is. This is how you design a modern workforce. And then there's one tiny third addition or adjustment, as the company called it. They said, well, under the old contracts where you had to work on site and 5 days a week, you had 30 days of paid vacation. And now you don't have 30, you have 10. If you're good at math, and believe me, I have never been great at math. However, if you go from a 5-day working week to a 4-day working week, that's 20% less. So from a mathematical point of view, you should go from 30 to 24. And by the way, going down to 10, as this company did in Europe, was illegal, offended the law, it escalated quickly. And now they had to recall the whole thing and go for 24, as it is mathematically correct. However, management, leadership, executives considered it appropriate to tell people, well, you now work Monday to Thursday and you can work from home. So paid time off is 2 weeks and a bit of a bridge day, maybe, not more. And that's not the worst example. And when you think, what comes next? There's a third example, which is not even funny. And this ended up on the internet because it was written via WhatsApp. It was a communication between a leader and an employee. And it happened in hospitality. And the employee said, there's a situation, we have to put our dog to sleep. And it's the family dog. The children grew up with it. And it's a very serious situation. At the moment, when I look at my shifts, and I already give you a heads up here because we have to put the dog to sleep, which happens next week, I'm working until the evening, and then I have to go to the vet and put my dog to sleep. Next morning, I can't work because I will not be in the position to be able to focus on anything, especially not when customers are standing in front of me. And now you wonder, what is that leader going to text back? And the leader texted back, if putting the dog to sleep couldn't be rescheduled and you could do it on a Friday so you can recover during the weekend. Whatever you think right now is probably exactly what I thought as well. Sometimes, even when you think that gross misbehavior from leaders can't get any worse, then you see these cases and you see it gets worse day by day. And of course, after looking at these problems, we now have to look at how to do it better. And especially when you might think now, well, I think sometimes I am not great, or I am not the best sometimes, maybe. That's a good starting point. As long as you sit here, listen and say, hey, I want to work on myself, that is a good starting point. So let's look at where do we start? Because many people say, I want to get better, but I just don't know where to start. I don't have a starting point. And here's the starting point. The first is accept your own situation, meaning, and there are a couple of aspects you have to go through now. What is your situation in life? What are your emotional experiences? What is your leadership experience? Then what are your interpersonal, but also the personal experiences, meaning all the highs and lows that happened in your life? And here comes the most challenging part, accept your privileges. And I'm going to start with myself here, because some people will now say, oh yeah, I know privileged people, Oxford, Cambridge, rich family. I'm not one of these, moving on. No. This is not what I'm talking about. This is not what I'm talking about. Accepting privileges starts way, way earlier and on a way lower level. I just give you an example. I grew up in Barmstedt, which is a very small village in northern Germany. And of course, I could now go through all the negative facts. It's a very small village. And I had to go to the next city to go to any kind of high school or college. German school system is slightly different. We had a 3-tier school system at the end when you go from elementary school to the next school. And I was recommended to go to the so-called gymnasium, which is the highest of the 3-tier system. However, it was 10 miles away. So getting up early every day, coming home pretty late. And the school where I went to was a so-called social focus point, which means it's a pretty bad school. All 3 tiers were taught in one building, so quite rough from the circumstances. And I can tell you that was not always great. I didn't always appreciate being in that situation. However, other people were at the exact same school as I were. And in my opinion, they were not any smarter or less smart than I am. And there was only one difference. At home, their parents probably said, well, do whatever you want. It's your future, not mine. And what my parents said is, do whatever you want. It's your future, not mine, followed by the phrase, and by the way, the minimum marks we expect you to achieve are the following. And when I didn't achieve these school marks, then there were consequences, taking away the power cable from the computer, from the Nintendo device I like to play on, or taking away the cable for the TV. The younger people who are listening, back in the days, TVs needed cable, otherwise you didn't have any picture on it. Long ago. So all they said, you can't play football, you can't go to the football match during the weekend because school has priority. And that already is a privilege. The privilege that you have people at home, because when you're young, you have no idea about the consequences in later life of having education or having no education. The privilege of having people at home who say, it's important you go to school and you're going to succeed, at least within your means to a reasonable extent, is a massive privilege. And I received that privilege, knowing that education is always important in your life to achieve anything. So accept your privileges. After you accepted your privileges, you go through what is your situation in life, what are your emotional experiences, your leadership experiences, and then the interpersonal experiences and your personal experiences, the highs and the lows. That already takes a while. However, then you have a realistic picture of where are you right now. And from this point, you now have to say, okay, so I hereby have to derive what is my situative, so in different situations, what is your situative competence, but also your situative incompetence. And there's a certain delta, a gap in between, which has to be filled. And I give you an example, and because I don't want to call anyone out, I'm going to use myself here. So when someone, for example, says, and I'm using the example which I just mentioned, when someone says, we have to put a pet to sleep, or when someone says, one of my children is seriously ill, I can tell you, because I never had any pets. I never had a family dog, and I never had children. That is a deliberate life choice. I decided actively to be single. So I don't have children, I don't have pets, I live a minimalist lifestyle. So I don't know the emotion connected to it. And that is a gap that needs to be filled. One of the reasons why I have a coach and a mentor who helps me, and who has that background, by the way, who professionally helps me to cope with these situations, to learn before things go wrong. And please, especially when you are not in the situation of these people, do not come up with phrases where you say something like, oh, I can imagine it's pretty hard for you, because we cannot imagine how hard it might be. I have no idea how it is when you have 3 children, one gets sick, automatically the other 2 get sick as well. Suddenly COVID comes along, and you have to and you have to organize school and pandemics and masks and vaccines, traveling back and forth under all the regulations. And then you want to have a personal career as well at work somehow. And all of a sudden you catch COVID, etc., etc., etc. I have no idea how that is, because I only have to take care of myself, which puts me in and here we are again, privileged situation. And especially when you have no clue about the situation, do not pretend that you have. Especially a certain generation thinks that pretending to have a clue shows some sort of control, that you're mastering the situation, and you do not. When I see, and this happened in coachings where I had to talk to people about this who couldn't believe why I criticized them, and at the end, they could believe, when you have a female employee who opens up that she had a miscarriage, and you say, I can believe it's pretty hard for you, you have no idea how appalling this phrase can be. Because no man who has not born a child or tried to make a child born can imagine. And I'm getting quite emotional here, as you see, because one of my close friends had 2 miscarriages, and their leaders behaved in a way. I honestly struggle to consider these people reasonable with that reaction, with the reaction they thought, with the reaction they showed. Sorry. So you have to see, what is your situative competence? Because some things in life you might already have experience, and you will be do pretty well with that. But what is also the situative incompetence, and the delta, the gap in between? You need professional guidance how to do that. The other option is you do it by trial and error. When you do trial and error, it means you're going to do it wrong at a certain point in time. Then you have the harm, you see the harm, and then you learn from it. Probably not the way how your organization, your corporation, your company prefers to deal with the matter. However, some people might now claim, well, it's all about empathy or having no empathy. And you're partly correct. Empathy helps a lot. When you are able to feel as others feel in their situation, that is very helpful. However, no one can be blamed for having empathy or no empathy, because empathy is something you either have or you do not have, unlike the other option, which is empathic behavior. Empathic behavior is a learned behavior, which we can all learn, because otherwise leaders will simply say, hey, I am how I am, don't have empathy, sorry, not my fault. And I can tell you, I went to a school in the next city, which was pretty rough. And I'm very sure when you grow up in a very small village where life is pretty straightforward, especially when it comes to conflict resolution, it's not discussion that leads the conflict in these places. And when you go to a pretty rough school, you learn how to take care of yourself, or you don't. And then go under, which is even worse. However, I do not consider myself the most empathetic person. I learned empathic behavior because it's important to do so. When you go on my LinkedIn, you see the education and the coaching and everything I received, which helped me tremendously, because these decisions I make can now be based on empathic behavior, which is a learned behavior. Because without having family and children, I cannot act as if I had or have, because I don't. And empathic behavior helps a lot. You have to recognize and see by yourself. You have to always improve yourself with a constant approach of developing yourself to be better than you were before. Because as soon as you don't, As soon as you don't, certain generations will enter the job market, then they enter the working world, and you will not understand what they are up to. You have no idea what drives them, and you simply say, strange generation, I don't really get them. And then you treat them the wrong way, you will lose talent, and suddenly you're sitting there and you will say, oh, no one wants to work anymore. It's such a problem. And no, you created a talent management issue. You damaged your employer branding. You damaged the reputation of your organization due to your leadership behavior. As soon as you don't, in high comma, get a new generation that enters the job market, it simply means you lacked the preparation. And of course, when now someone says, well, with all the different aspects they have, work from home, work from anywhere, this, that, pandemic, crisis, cost of living, blah, 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 and suddenly they want something extra here, something extra there, and they want to have great payment, but they don't want to work 60 hours a week. Look, this is how all generations talk down on each other. And I just give you a very simple example. My grandparents talked down on my parents and said, how can you listen to rock music? That's awful. My parents talked down on me, said, how can you listen to techno music? That is awful. And so on and so forth. And we have to end that chain that every generation thinks we are better than the next one. It is not only a privilege, but also it is the right thing to do for society. My grandfather in factories had to work 80 hours a week to make ends meet and feed the family. And when my father then started to feed his family as a public servant with high incomes only 40 to 45 hours a week, that was the right development. And now we're going somewhere below 40 hours per week for a full-time position. It is the right development that people have what is formerly known as work-life balance. And every time I mention that, someone else will now show up and say, oh, with all these extras here and extras there, don't we have more important problems to deal with? And the right answer is, yes, we do. But professionals can take care of more than one problem at the same time. Are you a professional? And this is a question you can now answer by yourself. Dealing with emotional poverty, all the aspects I mentioned, including empathy, empathic behavior, situative competence or incompetence, looking at your own situation, life situation, emotional experiences, leadership experiences, interpersonal and personal experience, highs and lows, and the acceptance of privilege. I know it's a lot of work, but it's worth doing, especially when you aim to be a great leader in your organization. And of course, I published about this, expert.nb-networks.com. You find everything you need there to put your email address in, because then every Wednesday you receive an email, and this email gives you access to all the publications I do. But for free, it's only available via this email that is sent out once per week, 100% content. There's an ad-free guarantee. And when you now say, hey, I actually have questions, Niels. Can we talk about this? Yes, of course. Of course we can. Drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com, and then we take it from there and have a nice chat about it and talk about what you like to talk about. When you, of course, have something very specific where you say, hey, can we book you for training, speaking, coaching, consulting, mentoring, or something in the long run, project interim management, or we have an event, can you host it or speak there? I mean, we have the future HR and the largest European decision maker expo and fair coming up in September, where I now booked for 12 speeches in 3 days, which is a record since I'm in business. Yeah, we can talk about that as well. However, you can also just drop me an email and have a chat with me, and we just talk about the issues where you say you need some help, and then we take it from there. It doesn't cost you a penny to chat with me. So let's go for it. Most important now is apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the change in the organization that you want to see happening. I wish you all the best implementing these steps in your organization. Always here and happy to help. And for this week, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.